Hey guys, it's Lohpally here with another video, and today we're going to be going over the top 5 support picks for patch 9.1. So, since the preseason's been going on, there haven't been too many changes. Pretty much the only noticeable one for this patch on any supports is mostly the Zyra buffering buff, where if you press Q and then use your W and move at the same time, it was kind of canceling it. So mostly just a quality of life change in that regard. So now we'll just jump into our top 5 picks. And now my number 5 choice.
Knowledge through disintegration.
I think this champion is exceptionally strong since pushing in bottom lane and getting the plates on the turrets is very valuable, and poke is very strong and potent right now, as it's easy for you to dive and kill people. Because of this, I think Vel'koz is incredibly strong. One thing to note though is I only have him on number 5 because Vel'koz is a little bit different and not nearly as linear to learn as other champions have been. Because of the nature of being able to shoot your skills from different angles and different sides, the skill that you need to develop on this champion is very specific to it, so it's a bit harder to pick up. I think when you play this champion incredibly proficient, this champion goes actually a lot higher in my tier list, but just for the sake of argument that a lot of people haven't been practicing Vel'koz that much, I put him at number 5. So we'll just jump right into the runes and masteries for this champion, which is going to be us taking Comet, and then Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, and Scorch. You can change out Scorch for Gathering Storm if you feel like your games go relatively long in most cases. After that, we're mostly just going into Inspiration, just picking up things like Biscuits and Cosmic Insight, which is the 5% CDR. If you don't have mana issues and don't really care as much about the Biscuits, you can swap this over to Boots, or potentially pick up a Stopwatch if you feel like you're getting all-in quite frequently, or want to get a Zhonya's relatively early against maybe something like a Zed or a Rengar. Most often your build is going to look like this, where you pick up your Sorcerer Shoes and upgrade to a tier 2 Spell Thieves as soon as possible. After that, the majority of people have just been going Ludens because it gives you a lot of mana and solves most of your mana issues, plus the CDR is quite nice, and it makes your poke that much stronger because the Ludens is proccing off. After that, we're going into Morellos / Zhonyas based on your needs for the team, depending on whether or not you're getting dove and killed quite frequently, or if you don't need that, then you can just get the Morellos for the healing debuff and the tons of extra spell pen that it acquires. After that, we're going to be looking at Void Staff, and then after that, you just want to finish off with a Death Cap just to bolster up all of your ability power. Moving into number 4.
What delightful agony we shall inflict.
Much like Vel'koz, when you play this champion exceptionally well, he does go up in the tier list, but is still quite strong even if you're not too familiar with him. Thresh is really great just right now because a lot of junglers are playing early game champions, so it's really easy for you to set up ganks, and usually damage is so good right now that one hook is usually a kill. Between all of the pressure and the fact that he doesn't have to get to level 2 in order to create pressure via either stepping up in flame, auto-attacking, or hitting a hook at level 1, he comes in at number 4. So for rune setups, we're going to be looking at Aftershock and then Font of Life or Demolish depending on the circumstances. I usually like Font of Life if I'm going to be aggressive in the early stages and forcing trades, but if you feel like that's not necessary, Demolish is a fine pickup. After that, I've been a big fan of Second Wind if you're versus Poke, and Bone Plating if you're against something that is maybe more all-in, like Alistar or Leona. After that, we're just going to be always taking Overgrowth, since the amount of HP you get from this is quite good, and Revitalize and Unflinching aren't really that great right now. After that, for our secondary rune tree, we're going to be going Inspiration, and we're most likely going to be picking up Biscuits and Stopwatch, just because you don't want to pick up Boots since you want to be able to potentially buy Moby Boots earlier than 10 minutes, and Stopwatch is quite nice for maybe if you're getting all in to just save yourself and turn a complete fight. If you're not comfortable with Stopwatch, then in some cases you can go Cosmic Insight, and that is completely fine too. Another thing to note though is you might switch your Biscuits over to Minion Dematerializer if you decide that you like Relic a little bit more than Coin. For the majority of my games though, I'm going to be going Moby Boots and then Coin, which we upgrade to the full tier 3 because of the fact that it's very cost efficient, gives you an extra ward, and covers some of your HP in the early stages, especially if you're not going Relic. If you do decide to go Relic, then you just upgrade the Relic to tier 3, just like the Coin. After that, we're going to be going into Zeke / Locket, depending on whether or not you need more magic resist and AoE resistances, or Zeke's for more physical. Usually you end up building both of these though, as they're both great on Thresh, even if he's not stacking a lot of HP in the early stages. You can also opt into something like going to standalone redemption, maybe into Locket afterwards, as a substitute for Zeke's if you don't really like it. After that, usually when I have my Zeke's and Locket, that covers most of your armor and MR, but you really don't have too much HP, so I've liked substituting a Warmogs. This covers most of your CDR and gives you a fat chunk of health that will help you become incredibly durable and utilize your resistances a lot better. After that, the last item is mostly just up to your discretion whether you need resistances or armor. Things like Randuin's is great, or maybe an Abyssal Mask if you're in the team fights. You can also opt into a Stone Plate, Gargoyle Stone Plate if you feel like they're just focusing you and you're sitting in team fights and you just mostly don't want to die. Now my number 3 choice.
Nothing can hold me back!
Just a champion that generically is just good. Easy to set up ganks for with your flash combo, and combo is quite easy to hit since it's point and click. On top of that, he has really strong scaling since his ultimate just reduces damage across the board, so even if you don't have items, you're still really tanky for your team. And being a tank right now has a high premium since most of the other rules don't usually cover your tank slots. So jumping into our runes and masteries is going to be Aftershock, and then once again it's Font of Life or Demolish based on the circumstances at hand. Most of the time though I've been going Demolish over Font of Life, just because I usually find myself not needing it when I get my all-ins, as opposed to Thresh, who walks up and flays and procs Font a lot easier. After that, we're going second win if we're a poke, and then bone plating once again if we're against all-in. You can be greedy with the conditioning if you feel like the lane's not going to pressure you in a lot of stages, but in most cases you're going to be choosing between these two. And then after that, we're just going to be taking Overgrowth again, since the numbers on it just feel really good and makes your tank tankier. After that, we're going into Inspiration, and most people have been taking Hextech Flash and Biscuits / Minion Dematerializer based on your personal preference. If you don't like Hextech Flash or don't utilize it quite well, you can go into other things, but it's usually recommended that you get good practice with Hextech Flash because it allows you to go over terrain and score a lot more engages from brushes or Fog of War. So when we go into the builds, we're just going to be rushing mobility boots and upgrading our relic to tier 3 as fast as possible. This covers a lot of CDR, gives you a lot more gold influx. I also really am a big fan of the 200% health regeneration that's built into it, and overall upgrading to the relic just feels really good. After that, we're going to be going into Zeke's first pretty much exclusively, because of the fact that you're usually in the fray of the fight or in the middle of it. It's a lot easier for you to get value out of Zeke's, whereas Thresh is a little bit more ranged and kitey, so Zeke's can be good, but sometimes not always the best if you have an ADC. Now, if you are playing maybe with a mage bottom lane, examples of this are Nico, Cassiopeia, Brand, etc., then just substitute this for a Righteous Glory. I also like Zeke's because it builds out of a Glacial Shroud, which gives you a lot of mana so you don't run out of mana in team fights as easily, and covers some of your CDR, so big fan of these items in general. After that, you make the deviation between either Locket or Knight's Vow depending on the game. If there's lots of AoE damage or you need magic resistances, then Locket's going to be your go-to. But if there's a lot of physical damage or you want to keep someone alive like your AD carry and you're worried about them diving you, then Knight's Vow is going to be what you get. Eventually, you should have both of these items though, as they're both incredibly strong. Then once again, your last item is just going to be up to you depending on your resistances and armor requirements. Gargoyle's Stone Plate seems to be a really great one, but if you feel like you need more armor or just magic resist, then you can go into other things, such as Spirit Visage or Randuin's. Moving on over to number 2.
Ready to set the world on fire.
Brand just does an insane amount of damage currently, usually bullies most lanes quite well, and since he has % health damage, this champion does really well even if behind just from his passive. On top of that, because his % health damage does not have any damage caps, he's really great at taking things like Baron and neutral objectives like Dragon. So because of this, he not only is a great lane bully, but a great neutral objective taker too, which allows you to close out games a lot easier since Baron is broken. So there's going to be actually 2 different setups we're going to be looking at right now. So the first one is going to be taking Dark Harvest. Now, usually I've been a big fan of Taste Their Blood if I'm trading quite frequently, but a lot of people also like Cheap Shot as it gives you a bit more damage, especially on your combo. This is mostly a personal preference, but I've been more often than not taking Taste Their Blood over Cheap Shot. After that, we're going to just take Eyeball Collector because it's the only thing in the tree that gives you raw power. And then my personal preference has been Relentless Hunter, which is the one that gives you movement speed on kills or assists. The reason why I like this is I have a baseline movement speed that I'm very comfortable with, and usually you build sorcerer shoes on brand, not mobility boots, so just having that extra movement speed out of combat makes it a lot easier to navigate the map and move around, especially in the mid game. Big fan. The next one is for our secondary rune tree is going to just be sorcery, and we're going to be taking mana flow just so we don't run out of mana, and then absolute focus. I have seen a lot of people take transcendence, but usually it takes around 15 to 20 minutes to come online, so I'm not a big fan of it personally, and I usually don't take transcendence. The second complete setup that we're going to be looking at is taking Comet in lane rather than Dark Harvest, then going into mana flow, once again absolute focus, and then just taking Scorch since it just procs quite easily, and you usually want to be pressuring a lot. After that, I've been actually a big fan of taking Resolve secondary and going into either bone plating or conditioning based on early pressure in my lane. So if I'm worried about maybe a Alistar or Thresh all-inning me and killing me, I kind of like this tree a little bit more, especially if you can't stack the Dark Harvest in the early stages. It feels a little bit weaker than Comet overall, and I haven't been too big of a fan of it. After that, we take Overgrowth to be extra tanky. A thing to note about Overgrowth is it doesn't matter if you're building a lot of tank items or not, it's still incredibly valuable. It gives you about 100 to 150 HP, which is about 400 gold worth of efficiency, and I've just been a big fan of it, especially because most of the items you're going to be building on champions like Brand have health on it already, so it amplifies it even more. So for our build path, we're going to be getting our tier 2 Spell Thieves and Sorcerer Shoes. Then afterwards, if you get ahead, then getting an Oblivion Orb feels really good, as it will give you double penetration. This is also fine to do in Rush and Morellos if you need healing debuffs on people. We'll use examples of maybe playing against a Soraka, Nami, or Mundo in these cases. After that, you want to be able to get your Liandry's and Rylai's together, usually going Liandry's first, and then Rylai's second. After that, we get a Void Staff, and then at any point in time, if you feel like it, you can fit Azonia's in, but I'm not too crazy about it, since most of the time you just want to get your damage off, and if people are diving you, they're usually stacked. But it's fine if you personally feel like you need Azonia's in that case. In cases where you don't go the Oblivion Orb or Morels, and you just have Liandry's, Rylai's, and Void Staff, Luden's Fourth isn't a bad substitute since it gives you a lot of CDR. And finally, introducing number 1.
Feel the thorns embrace.
Especially with the changes that help her just for quality of life purposes, plus the ease access of Zyra because she can fight from a lot longer range since she can spawn plants and harass people more frequently, whereas Brand has to be a lot closer in proximity to do things. I find that Zyra does a lot more in lane. Another thing to note too is since Zyra's root goes through minions, whereas Brand Fireball can be blocked by it, it's a lot more ease of access to kill people in minion waves, whereas Brand has more of just a kill threat if he wraps around. Because of all these cases, Zyra feels a little bit safer and just a bit more consistent when it comes to that. Although she does do a little bit less damage than Brand in a lot of teamfights and doesn't offer the same neutral objective control. I think in general, though, that winning lane, it seems to come at a really high premium since the plates and how fast snowballing occurs, so I've just been a big fan of Zyra as of late. For the most part, I've been taking Comet on this champion just because I find it really hard to proc electrocute in most cases, plus it's really easy to get value out of Comet since when your plants auto-attack, it also reduces the cooldown of this. Afterwards, we're going to be taking Mana Flow, then Absolute Focus and Scorch. And then after that, this is mostly personal preference. If you feel like you need to be a little bit tankier in lane, you can go Resolve with Bone Plating and Overgrowth for the same property reasons that are attached to Brand. If not, or maybe you're against poke lanes, then maybe going Inspiration is going to be good with Biscuits plus Boots, just so that you can have Biscuits to sustain yourself when you're against long-range champions. Maybe you're against a Vel'koz or something else that outranges you. So, jumping into our itemization, once again, we're going to be going the Tier 2 Spell Thieves and Sorcerer Shoes. Quick touch on the reason why we only go Tier 2 instead of Tier 3. Spell Thieves got updated where the Tier 3 used to only have the 10% CDR, and that's why it costs 950 gold to upgrade. But in patches way long ago, then they added the Tier 2 Spell Thieves to have 10% CDR. So, outside of some HP and a little bit of extra warding ability and HP, then it's not really that valuable to upgrade. So that's why we only go to the Tier 2 in most cases. After that, same principle applies. Oblivion Orb if you're ahead, / need a Morellos for healing debuffs on anybody. Then, if you don't need that, or if you've built that, afterwards you're going to be getting your Liandry's, your Rylai's, and your Void Staff. And once again, you can fit Azonia's in there if you need to stop or prevent dying. Examples of this are maybe a Zed or a Rengar that's constantly jumping on you and killing you at the start of team fights. Anyway, guys, that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment in the section below, and let me know what you think about this tier list. I'm Lohpally. I'll see you next time. Peace.